Live from New Hampshire, it's time for the Science Cafe!
Learn about the latest technologic innovations today.
And you don't have to pay.
Expert panels with advanced degrees are sure to satisfy your curiosity.
Just we mention it's free.
And if you think you'll find a better time than this, then come on down and test your hypothesis. Cause you're gonna learn a lot if you wanna stay down in the Science Cafe.
My question was more on the treatment of the addiction, where the typical path is to be a full abstinence from this. How do your methods change when you're approaching it as something that you have to take in moderation? Because I know that this is not the only addiction where you would have to do a moderation type of thing rather than full abstinence. But how does that change your methodology and how you administer that therapy?
I'm going to be looking at how the client functions in their lives. What are the areas that can be built that help support doing something different? And then I am going to be actively also monitoring how much time is being spent. I'm using gaming as the example, but for whatever the piece may be. And so in developing that therapeutic relationship, a real level of trust that they're reporting how they're using it, when they're using it, what it means, all the stuff, what does it serve to them, so that we can hopefully watch. I'll score them, how many hours and so forth every time I sit with them and start to see where change is possible. And why was it possible here? The one gentleman I worked with when the amount of gaming, he was a father, married, full-time job, and the amount of hours he put in on the daily was hard to understand. And it was partly because he was up all night and then, whatever. And when I said, we gotta, not only do we have to cut this back, we gotta look at days where you don't game. And I got the big eye headlights, sweet Jesus, and then walking through that process and understanding that that may sound scary now, but we're headed that way, and it's not just going to be that you're not going to be gaming, but we're going to be doing other things in that time. And then when you start seeing those successes, I pounce all over that, and I'm like, why was this possible? What did we do? Where can we do that out? And likewise, when we start see a day that's a flop. What tripped us up? So I'm very interested in the mechanics of how that, if we're calling it addiction or just the abuse, how it is at play in that daily life, and that's where everyone's different. And then in knowing that, understanding what can be tweaked, what can be removed, what can be built in.
This is new, right? We don't really know what truly works, and we're really figuring out, it's individualized. But the critical thing is replacement. You can't go abstinence. You have to really figure out what's the unmet need. But specifically, one of the things that I do, filtering and blocking is always a part of it. Because I told you, my phone has a password that I don't know. I always wonder. I don't know. I try sometimes. I locked myself up a couple times. But so the thing is, that is important, but that's not the solution. Another thing is what you said, John, was really critical. What do you do when most teenagers make plans about their real not social life outside the digital world through screens, right? So you can't take that away. But what I try to do is I try to organize the entire systems. I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist, which is basically, it's a funky way of saying it, a psychotherapist who thinks systemically. Okay? Woohoo! Way to go, sister. So what you do with that is you have to think in terms of if I think of this family as an individual, I'm screwed. You have to set limits on your kid, and the first thing I'm going to hear is well, they can't talk to their friends. What am I going to do? Here's the thing. Whenever possible, I try to hit large groups. If you need to have buy-in from other people, I ask sometimes people, can you, when I work with younger kids or young adults or teenagers, who is the next person who can help you with this? Who else do you think is struggling with this? Have buy-in from peer group so that they all make a decision to not be online after 11 o'clock. That's when you improve your chances of really doing something meaningful. And it's not easy. Parents go like, oh, another meeting that I have to go to with other parents that I may not like, right? But yeah, you're going to have to reach out and really organize. And so systemically thinking, you need to engage communities. That is so critical. Otherwise, it is just kind of a pipe dream to kind of think that, oh yeah, I mean, I find, this is the great part, when you have that, Gavin, you talked about like therapeutic relationship. The funnest part for me is like when someone reveals to me another loophole they found in their restrictions. Like this one kid, it was the funniest thing. I was doing a workshop. His father's sitting right next to me. He goes, yeah, the iPhone's app, the restriction app. He figured out a way pretty quickly. He just changed the time, and when he reset the time, the iPhone doesn't know what's going on. And then he goes, he's like so happy, right? So it's impossible to but right now, the good thing is Apple actually listened. Now that loophole is gone. I'm pretty sure something else is going to come up. But it's really about engaging the larger system, really working with the family, including parents, but also siblings, spouses. What is your role going to be? If addiction, don't forget, addiction thrives on shame. And shame can only thrive in isolation. It's like black mold. When there's nothing, no sunlight, it will be like, woohoo, I'm free. All you need to do is open the window. You don't even have to do anything else. It will die. So when you expose it, that is a critical part to really help people that you are one of billions, of people. And then when you de-shame, that's the critical part, and engage their environment. If you don't engage their environment, I can be Freud himself, which I don't want to be, by the way. But so you can't be successful.
I agree with what all Oz is saying, and how, again, we were kind of learning on the fly. But at the same point, either people are looking for a therapist to do this, or you're wanting to do it. If you don't know it, this goes for any, a lot of different things that we talk about culture, and there's a gaming culture. If you don't know that culture, you're going to be pretty irrelevant to a youngin' sitting across from you who is in deep. I can't tell you how many times I've had parent comes in, child comes in, I'm meeting for the first time, blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh, problem with the gaming. I turn to them. I start rattling off some questions. What's your gamer tag? Blah, 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 whatever. And we start, and they literally will sit back and just watch. And they're like, I've never heard my kid speak like this. I don't know what you guys are talking. It's like a different language. But you're doing something. And it's again, because I get it. I know those cultures. I know the excitement. I know, and so the ability to have those moments where someone's telling them the loopholes and so forth, and you have those insights, which of course like Oz, I'm like, oh, that's clever. I write that little one down, and next time when I walk with somebody else, I say, hey, what about you know that? Oh, yeah, I know that. Of course, I know that. And you play it off, but the ability to be effective is to know and understand why this is important, and how it plays in their lives, and what it means to their friends and all that. It's a really important part to that treatment, in my opinion.
Just how different levels on the spectrum of addiction, how it affects people's kind of all their judgments, how that relates to someone justifying their own actions, how you kind of observe where people are along that spectrum, maybe on their own self-reporting and in some sense in your own observations.
As it goes up, and if you start from a place where either from not gaming or use on a lot of, for people that are on their iPads, phones, whatever, if you start from there and you see sort of everything that's at play in their life, and you start going up into what it is to play a game and so forth. If it feels similar, what I'm looking for, in my time with a client, if they're talking, oh, this, and here's a little bit of game, and here's this, and here's that, that's sort of the baseline of things being managed well, things in balance, however we want to look at it. As it goes up, you start seeing the more and more of the reliance. This is what we talk about. This is where all the focus is, and at the same time, you start seeing a deficit in the other areas of life. And as that continues to increase, you start seeing the real issues that occur. And I think one of the more profound ones, I was called in by a local high school, and they were having a meeting with some parents and a student because of issues that they were seeing with this student in just not being present, not being able to function on any type of scholastic task and so on. And in our conversation, and I was asking some questions about, how the person games, how much time, all the, the stuff you kind of go through to judge that. And I asked, what have you seen, that has cause for concern? And this one still to this day blows me away. They family reported having an outing as a weekend, and they went out with friends, and they were snowmobiling. It was in the winter, and the person that the school and all was concerned of was snowmobiling, was driving a sled, and was so exhausted from another prolonged night of gaming, and when Oz mentioned 10 hours of gaming, and everyone said that's a lot, yeah, it is a lot, but it's for some people it's not, and I see a lot of that. So this person would game through the night. The house is quiet, parents are asleep, and that's free reign time, typical for people that are really in the deep. And so anyways, this person was riding a sled, fell asleep at the wheel, and tumbled off. And I can't, to this day, anyone that's ever, ridden motor vehicles, the recreational vehicles, ATVs, whatever, that is a full body experience. The wind is whipping, and there's some level of adrenaline that pumps. Those are fun things. And to be in that space, and to be overridden by how tired we are because of what the gaming has done is I think my example for what it looks like when it really gets out of whack and it affects his judgment and so forth. That was pretty, when with all the work I've done, my eyes popped when I heard that one.
So I can't speak to any therapeutic settings, but I can certainly speak first. Like my own experience, especially as a World of Warcraft player, early 2000s. Actually, my friend Dave is right there, and he knows because he was with me.
You guys are wowers?
At one point. Well, I don't think they call them wowers, Oz, but there's no positive. But so the worst case example is Friday night. My girlfriend hung out with me, watched a few movies. She's all right, I'm going to be back Sunday morning. I was like, all right. Started playing WoW. She came back like 4 hours later, and I'm like, I wasn't going to supposed to see you till Sunday. She's like, it is Sunday at 9 a.m. And when you look at my life at the time, and it's like, well, my job sucks. I can't. I don't have to worry about gas money at this point. Like, I don't. If anyone remember early 2000s, it's like $4 a gallon. This is pretty iffy. Oh my God. So $8 for gas is an investment. But why bother if I can sit at my? It's the barrier of entry is so low. To sit at your desk and say, I'm going to go on an adventure. That sounds great. It's so attractive and appealing, and that whatever it was, like 26-hour span was just such a blur to me, and everything is telling you to go forward, to make the numbers go up, to go forward and hang out. Like, oh, you don't want to disappoint people, you've made arrangements. At least in this, thank God that has changed. But when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't even feel like a choice. It just feels like one long slide right into an awkward Sunday morning, and your girlfriend's like, why have you not showered? There's Pop-Tart crumbs everywhere. Let's not fault Pop-Tarts. That's my own that's a darker addiction that can never be exercised. No, but there is no indication that what you're doing is wrong. And it feels great. Until, like you said, you look back and you're just disgusted with yourself, and you're like, that's my first person experience. Full disclosure, I did drop out of high school, landed all right, but a lot of people didn't. There's a very famous case, early 2000s. His name was Sean Woolley. He was an EverQuest player. EverQuest is even before World of Warcraft. EverQuest is very, like 1998, 1999. And Sean Woolley, he was a young man, I don't have to tell you this story. Young man, white, early 20s, late teens, living alone.
He thinks that's
and all he has for his support network is, to get to his support network, he has to log in somewhere. He has to log into the EverQuest launcher. Unfortunately, that boy took his own life. And I say a boy not to denigrate him, but I mean, he never got to become anyone. And again, I'm not faulting technology for that. It is just that it is, like, you know that sliding feeling I was saying? You just kind of go with it. And unfortunately for and I think there is a Woolley Foundation or something to that effect, some kind of nonprofit organization that actively seeks out, it's changed so much since then that I don't know what it is now, but at least that story, I think about that story constantly. Because it is such a prelude to where we are now with young white males feeling disaffected, feeling isolated, but you know what? They can go online, they can interact, and it feels to them like it's a support network, but it isn't.
When you're in a casino, do you see clocks? No. Do you have windows? None. It's called stopping cues. Psychological term for it is every known addictive screen-based technology, first thing they remove, once again, they get their playbook from gambling, they remove stopping cues. Facebook used to have an end to the feed. You go like, okay, do you want to go? And then it will ask, like, do you want to go later, like earlier on? Now it's endless. YouTube plays constantly. It's actually armament warfare. It's ridiculous. So first, Netflix started doing it, like autoplay. Do you want to play? I'll play it in 3 seconds. And then YouTube goes like, well, we can't let them do it. We got to do it. Then Facebook, you know what? We're going to up them. We're going to play it before they click on it, when they hover on it. So it is at this point removing starting cues and stopping cues is the key. It's just one of the techniques. That was like the previous question. In terms of your question around judgment, who here heard of the concept of derealization? Okay. How about game-based? What is your understanding of derealization?
Just like removing the difference between reality and what's fake.
Bingo. That's it. Like what's here and what's out there and not being able to differentiate that. Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
I'm also studying therapy, so like little bit of advantage.
It shows. You're doing great. How about game-based psychosis? That's a pretty obvious one, right? So as you would know, Gavin, right? Like people, you can actually, if you are under influence, if you go to the hospital and you're actually acting psychotic, they will not admit you. Okay, they will just wait until you're sober up and see if you're really psychotic. Are you really psychotic, or you're like substance abuse psychotic? So that's the same thing with gaming. So the derealization, there are elements. I haven't seen anything as bad as the one that I'm about to tell you, but people can really forget whether they're in the matrix, so to say, or they're in real life. There is a lot of reporting of kids who play Minecraft seeing cube-shaped trees in their reality, blurring of reality. So don't forget, your brain is literally, it's what you perceive as reality is basically some visual, some auditory, some other stuff, sensory input is put together and placed on a screen, and that is your reality. So it's actually internal, okay? So your reality can be affected by what's going on internally, and you can see stuff that's not out there. That's psychosis, okay? That's schizophrenia, that's psychosis. So it is now a very common thing that gaming-induced psychosis is a very well-known thing. In terms of affecting judgment, many people, like, this is a very dark and sad topic, Sandy Hook shooter was a gamer, but also was on the spectrum, was not treated. There was other stuff, that was going on. So, but it is known to create significant issues around when you're derealized, when you are in psychotic mode. You don't know whether you're shooting things in the game or real people. So that is the most extreme case of judgment errors, okay? But also, I'm going to come back to you. Your phone, has it ever said no to you, sir? Does your wife say no to you sometimes? No to you? Okay. So your phone, as devices, they will never say no. They will always say yes. So when you grow up with this thing of like, whatever you want, yes, you simply shape your brain to literally have zero tolerance for discomfort. Talk about judgment errors. Like, I deal with, actually, my nephew was visiting, and he talks about how transient and difficult girls are. He's 18. I'm like, dude, you have no idea. And partly I started talking to him, like, your generation grew up with this. Any moment someone says, no, I don't like that, I have a different preference, you can't handle it. So talking about judgment errors, you're not the right for me. She could be your wife forever. You don't even know. So the judgments, like, that's such a huge topic. But it's also not limited to technology. It happens to be around us all the time. Really interesting. There is some significant evidence that current generation is having less sex. Ready for this? Less sex, high schoolers, than any other generation in the past. What happened was, okay, I'm going to be a little crude. Most young men can't have real sex anymore because of pornography. That's why they're not having sex. Their arousal system completely got rewired. They're having erectile dysfunction issues at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15. They can't have sex. That's why they're not having sex, not because they learned to wait. So, like, it is such a, like, in 10 years, the amount of change that we've seen in neurology, behavior, and distress tolerance levels is staggering. So if you're not alarmed, you should be.
So now you guys, don't get off the hook. I'm going to ask you to talk about something while these people are busy digging in their pockets, and that is, I was reading an article about this today, and it said, digital addiction treatment starts by acknowledging you have a problem. And I think in all of your cases, you talked about how hard that was. So if you could talk a little bit about how do you get your patients, maybe even older patients more than younger, but how do you get them to acknowledge that they have a problem when they don't perceive it that way?
Actually, that part it comes with time, but it's usually not too difficult because at some point, the issues that they create, you start seeing where the pitfalls occur. And so whether it be, blah, 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 I was gaming till 4 a.m. Oh, that's interesting. What were you playing? And then, well, what happened in that morning when you had to go to school or go back to work? And then, oh, well, blah, 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 I was late, or I blew that test. And oh, well, that's interesting as well. So the problems, if you spend the time and with the client, the problems will rise to the surface sort of organically because it will cause problems. You can't put in that much time per day and balance everything out. They'll arise.
You mean the consequences of the addiction?
Yeah.
If I could go back to myself right now and tell my 17-year-old self exactly what this was going to amount to, which is nothing, wouldn't have believed him. I could have the Back to the Future time machine there and everything, and I wouldn't believe it because you can't see the forest for the trees, right? The only thing that for me was, thank God, that teenagers' time spans, like attention spans, are finite. Again, thank God. And you just get sick of it. For me, some people will not. Some people maybe, I don't know, their personality, their preferences, or however they're predisposed, is that it doesn't matter to them. But I would say, and this is why I'm relatively hopeful about this generation, is that I think we are resilient. Not millennials, I'm saying even younger. I hope to God they're resilient. I think they will be. But I mean, when you pull back and for me it was a realization to say, this is the machine. The numbers are always going to go up. It's not going to result in anything. Some people that's not going to be enough. But for me, it was just like, I'm sick of it. I'm bored. Move on.
So you made the problem yourself. You called it a problem yourself.
Yeah, but that's not very realistic for you. And especially, no parent wants to hear that when their child's in the midst of it. Oh, it'll sort out by itself. Is that true in some cases? Yes. But that is, it's not much solace to people who are in the midst of it. But this is what I'm saying is that for everyone, and we'll look around the room and say, there aren't a lot of young people here to kind of, we're fine. But I promise you that they are resilient, at least at some level. I mean, ancient Greeks left their babies in the woods, and they came out of it. not a great metaphor for tonight, but humans have survived much worse at a much earlier age. So am I terrified? The way we've built it up this tonight, it's like, I don't know, it's the opioid epidemic or digital. They're both neck and neck. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true. And anyone who has that family member that has an opioid addiction will tell you it's not true. Maybe, anecdotal, sure. But I am hopeful that, in 10 years, the people who are my niece is 3 months old. I can't even me and her father, I can't even envision what her technology is going to be like. But I know for sure humans adapt. Some don't, and they will not do well, but we will be resilient, and they will be able to handle it better than my generation surely did. I don't know. But there's a lot of high-functioning gamers. People that lead crazy double lives, and I say double life like it's dramatic, but I mean, they have to be such high achievers. So, yeah, I think I could say the answer is yes, it's a game. The numbers go up. It's fine. Not great to hear that, but I think that we're more resilient than what we're giving them credit for.
I think I believe, the resilience of human spirit for sure. At the same time, like to answer your question specifically, cognitive understanding rarely leads to change. Like in anything. I mean, we're destroying the planet. We're still destroying the planet. 99% of the data says that we're destroying the planet. We're still destroying the planet. So understanding cognitively, sometimes even if you see like, this is really affecting my life, the hallmark of addiction, sometimes you see it, you still can't change it. So certain cases, just like in any spectrum of addiction or substance use problem or behaviors problem, is sometimes you will need more serious interventions that are actually residential. There's actually one as far as I remember, in our country, in Oregon, and I'm lucky to have one of her founders as my mentor. She started for her first clinic of internet addiction in 1998. Talk about seeing it coming, right? Like literally, and it was what she was talking about was like, well, it was actually the AOL chat rooms. People would get addicted to that. So you don't need to have like high, def screens. So to really, everything that Gavin said, this therapeutic relationship and the alliance is so critical. But sometimes, most often, especially with digital stuff, people will not come because they will not think that it's a problem. And often, it may not be quote an addiction, but it might be in the bordering abuse, creating issues. I was invited to be a part of a podcast called, if you ever want to listen to about how couples therapy work, about two couples therapists talking about it. It's called the Couch. My colleagues actually run it, and they invited me to talk about what it does to couples. I think the gentleman just left. Maybe he knew that I was going to talk about this. It causes significant problems in couples' relationships. For example, you guys probably know this. Do you know the term, like when you're with other people, and if I'm looking at my phone, instead of interacting with with you, I'm interacting with my phone? There's a name for it. Well, not FOMO. FOMO is a great one. Fubbing. I'm fubbing you. Instead of like looking at fubbing. Yep, it is a new word. It's not an old word. I don't even think it's a real word, but it is a word. It's used. So you basically, instead of me talking to you guys, I'll be looking at my phone, and you'll be looking at your phone, and you'll be looking at your phone. We're fubbing each other, basically. So that's what's happening in relationships. The phone, the devices are becoming primary attachment figures because they don't say no. I mean, look, like part of the stuff that, this is really funny because it was tragic at the moment, actually traumatic when I was first graduated. My nickname, because of part of my finishing thesis, was the porn guy. It's not a good name. Not a good name for a therapist, okay? Not at all. Because I was very interested in what porn was doing to people. And here's sometimes like what I do right now in my sessions. I do ask both men and women within 3 sessions, what is your relationship with, digital media, and what is your relationship with porn? With teenagers, I go a little bit further. How much porn do you watch? I don't even ask, like, are you watching or not? Like, and he goes, well, how do you know? Like, because you're a teenager. I know you're watching. So, and with pornography, it's the crack cocaine of digital addictions, okay? I'll give you an example of this. What it does is it basically, every single time you go after the hunt of the perfect clip, what really kind of makes you feel good about yourself or that really arouses you, and then you orgasm to that, okay? Neurologically speaking, what's happening is you're releasing oxytocin, the love connection hormone. Therefore, neurologically speaking, you're falling in love with porn and falling out of love with your partner. So it is very difficult for people to realize sometimes, because it's sinister. Like, you might be having issues in your life, in your couple's relationship, not only because of technology, but I bet a good chunk of it is because of technology, if you are using technology a lot. And unfortunately, people are really not aware of that.
I don't think we'll doubt that there's digital addiction. One of the biggest concerns I have is what the woman had previously said about eye contact and the social interaction that doesn't happen, especially with the pediatric group. I happen to have a pediatric background. So, and what kind of generations do we have now that are in the adolescent, early 20s, 30s at this point, and what's happening in the brain development of the children right now? Because for the longest time I've seen parents just hand the phone to a kid, a toddler, an infant. It's a babysitter mechanism. And I'm really concerned about it. Somebody had mentioned who. I don't remember where you were going to go with that, but I'm wondering about, one, the percent of your practices that you do see children and the spectrum of ages, and what we can do about it, since you're talking about that it's only going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better at all. I'm not very optimistic, I'm sorry. And I don't think that kids are that resilient in terms of digital and social media, because it's so worldwide. I'm not that optimistic. I'm sorry.
I think the question is what percent. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. I have enough kids at home, so I don't work with kids in my practice. So, but I would say, I don't necessarily track it, but I would say a good 75% of the people that I work with I would put them on the spectrum of technology use issues is present in their lives.
Can we do about it? Because it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
Okay. Do you want to have several hours? I was just talking to the gentleman before I came here. I think you guys really agree with this. Prevention is infinitely easier than intervention. Simple as that. That is the most critical thing that I always tell. Prevent, and if you can prevent, you don't have to worry about trying to turn a large oil tanker from like slowing down and turning it. Just if you can prevent it. That will be my shortest answer.
So I can't speak to the percentage, but I can speak to the tools. Let's say these less resilient people cannot deal with it. Apple, as a matter of fact, has 512-bit encryption, sometimes even more, that the FBI actively is trying to get a backdoor into. If you want military-grade security on your devices, the tools are there. They may not be intuitive, they may not be straightforward, but thank God there's YouTube to look up a video to see how to secure it, how to really control and clamp down on your children's devices. The tools are there. And not only are the tools there, they're nearly military grade, if not military grade. That might be the perfect Trojan horse, because Android has only gotten better and better with their parental controls. So if you want to be devious, I bought you a brand new phone with this encryption, and I own it. The tools are there. Again, are they straightforward and easy to understand? No. They are buried, right. But look it up.
we're living this right now. I have a 14-year-old. He's hacked into everything that we've put on his devices. Cracked the code and got in. He goes to a science tech school. I'm not going to say a name. Everybody knows where it is. Everything is done online. They don't socialize. They socialize online. I can say there has been positives. He's met people all over the world. He can talk about education systems all over the world. He talks about politics all over the world. So he's making connections. It's the gaming and the raging. He's 14. It's hormones.
So he knows what to be angry about. 14.
But when he first went, it was like girls. Now he has no interest in girls anymore. How do we compete? How do we compete with it? I started him in a Waldorf school. He hikes. We go out. We're outside. But how do we compete with this when they're getting that much pleasure and anger and everything else they need? And it's their social life. He's an only child. He'd rather be online with his friends than with real people. Real people. But they according to him, they are real people. And here they are. But what do we do? How do we compete? I'm going to ask you because you've been there.
Me as a child, I mean, my answer is a cop out. It's they'll grow out of it, which is not, like I said, I'm gonna tell you, it's cold solace. Doesn't feel good to hear that when you're in the middle of it, and you know more than I do. I can tell you that at 14, I knew everything. I knew everything. I knew what to be mad about. I knew what to be sad about. I knew what I cared about. I knew what art I like. And then 5 years later, I was embarrassed about all those things. And how many people have heard of Fortnite, even in passing? It isn't cool anymore for him. It's cold. I'm not offering you. I'm offering you cold solace. Is that the things you can count on are that children's attention spans are finite. We made it through Satanic Panic in the 80s and 90s. Thank God. We made it through Dungeons and Dragons. Thank God.
We do. I still play it at home with my kids.
As do I. I like 3.0. It's a great version of the game. But again, for some people, it's not. I'm not offering solace. I'm saying, looking at the tools, I'm obviously more optimistic than Oz. We will move forward. But that's just time in general. It's moving forward. The generation coming after you will be better at locking it down. Actually, if you could design it the way you wanted it to, like maybe the generation coming up, but it's Generation Z, is that right? The Tide Pod generation. I rub my hands and think of ways that they will secure their children. And maybe they'll go through the same problems, I'm sure, but the tools are there now. They're not easy to use, and it's not intuitive for, frankly, people over even 24. You look at some of the menu options in Android and iOS, and it's only gotten, there's I don't even know how many categories. It's a lot. The tools are there. They're not put up straightforward. I think we'll make it through, but as for the wider questions, I have no answers. Those are like some earth-shattering, possibly late capitalism questions that I'm not experienced to deal with. But who will answer all these questions is my good friend Gavin.
I hear what you're saying loud and clear, and the challenge is because the gaming isn't going anywhere, and so the excitement and all that is going to build. But how we present it, how we manage it, that is a very real thing that has real impact. So you talk about, here's a phone and he's hacking it. Well, that's really a betrayal of trust. So if we can't trust you, then why do you have this device? And yoink, and so forth. So that's where I, as a therapist and so forth, I begin to play hardball, because I'm no longer talking about what it is to manage it. Is what is your behavior saying at this point? And a phone and all is a privilege, and it has a responsibility behind it. So to have this, we have to be responsible. If you're not doing that, then I can't then support that you're responsible to manage that. And then we can talk about, again, how we build trust, how we manage it, and so forth. Same goes with gaming. And I spoke to this a moment ago, the addiction and the shame and so forth. And so for so many people, when I talk about gaming, where do you game? And they have these setups in their bedrooms, okay? And they're pretty elaborate. They can be pretty amazing. The gaming chairs, the multiple monitors. They'll have. I can go on and on about how sweet that setup is. And again, it makes sense. They're doing what they like. They're quiet. They're out of the way. We're enjoying a peaceful household. But what it does is it creates a privacy. It creates that this is my space. This is my time. And that's just not the reality, you know. So I'm always like, if there's a problem, bring that gaming into the living room. And if you're not managing, if you're raging, and if you're throwing a controller and breaking it, there's $50. You're paying for that. And well, I don't have $50. My parents, no. So you start bringing in those real world realities to push back against those negative behaviors you see. And then that's where the parent has to hold hard, because that's a fight. I mean, that is a battle, but that's where I will choose to fight it, because your behaviors are no longer supporting what you are enjoying. And we are becoming out of whack. The ones I see always that are really effective, and I understand that this is not always easy, and it's typically the dads, but the dads that game with their kids, man, that's a different world, because they're sharing in that space and they're doing it together. And so those values, those morals are being brought into that gaming space in a way that then helps support what it is to do it in a way that's appropriate.
They're in Mario Kart.
Yes. Yeah, exactly, because that's being shared, so the learning, the teaching is still going on. The problem is it's being so separated from the parents, this family dynamic, and therefore the kids are choosing what's appropriate and how we interact. They're getting their cues off of whoever random person on the other side of that screen, and when they curse out or use really just disgusting language, that's okay. Well, if you're dropping that language in the living room, oh, hell no. You know, and that's, so you deal and address the behaviors in a way that either supports or denies the activity.
I mean, this is really hard. You know, this is so we can talk about hours. But look, there's I forgot her name. There's a psychiatrist in the West Coast, California. She refuses to prescribe any medication to anyone who's heavily engaged in screens unless they go on a month-long screen diet. And to her report, 70% of the time, she doesn't have to prescribe after that. So one of the things that's happening is, like Gavin really said something really interesting, because in our field, like I'm lucky because I was Commodore 64. I had a 386 PC, monochrome. I think it was 33 megahertz, which was amazing. I know. It has one speed CD-ROM. My friends were like, "Oh my," salivating. So I'm lucky that I kind of grew up with that. But many therapists, because they are either a different age group or they have not grown up with that, they may not know that reality at all. They might just look back at this is an issue of like, well, I grew up with technology. I had TV. Yeah, your TV is not similar to that. So sometimes what needs to happen is sometimes you need clinical intervention. That's one thing. That's an option. The other piece is, my guess is, the things that you're talking about. When someone comes to therapy, often if you're one of those, who don't really notice this as a problem, a therapist, you might start treating ADHD or ADD. You might start treating depression and anxiety. Heck, if you're a PCP, you might start treating erectile dysfunction at the age of 15, right? Well, it's not working. I'll give you something, right? No one asks these questions. Well, very few people ask these questions around screens. So then the secondary symptoms, like attention issues, ADD, depression or anxiety, they are not the cluster of symptoms that you need to be treating. They're the secondary. If you don't treat the primary, you can go all you want on Prozac. Well, have at it. It's not going to change anything. You can fill someone up with stimulants. The thing is, any game that we know of and we play, all right, first-person shooters or any kind of exciting game, is a stimulant. Okay, raging. I'm going to offer you to do something. Any of you, go to your favorite coffee place tomorrow. Throughout the day, drink 4 large cups of coffee, and drive on I-95. You're going to rage. You are going to rage because you're going to interact with Massachusetts drivers. That's the only reason you're going to rage. No, it's because if you're on stimulants, you're going to be adrenaline pumped. Okay? So it is a neurological correlation and causality. It is literally creating caffeine-like, stimulant-like highs. So it's not your child's personality to rage. It is literally 4 cups of coffee, I-95 driver rage. You might be a enlightened Buddhist and might rage, right? So it's it's such a large topic to do what to do, and I feel for you because, which is great. But also, it's another thing that you talked about, these education things, and there's a whole other hoax from my perspective. There's no real evidence, really. You guys might disagree with me. The research points out there's no real evidence having screens at schools is actually improving educational outcomes. There's none, zero. Do you know how much that industry gains every year? $60 billion. $60 billion. So, do you know who's the country that actually comes number 1 in educational outcomes for the past 10 years? Nope. Korea. Nope. It's cold. Let me give Iceland. Okay? Icelandic people, their educational outcomes number 1. They refuse to have screens in their classrooms. They have 90 minutes of recess every day, and kids go out no matter what. It's Iceland, for God's sakes. Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, no, Finland, I'm sorry, not Iceland, Finland. It's still cold. Sorry, I gave you wrong information, Finland. Finland is number 1, and that's what they're doing. So there's also no evidence of really supporting that having tech-based learning is actually somehow better than non-tech-based learning.
An interesting thing to sit up here, and I know myself and my panels, I could rattle off nightmare after nightmare about what we're talking about. I could scare the living bejesus out of you guys if I choose to. And there's a level that's sort of uncomfortable, and I want to own that. When we hear the word crisis, and again in the work we do, we also mention opioid crisis and so forth. And man, I could tell you that crisis and the damage it has is freaking devastating and so forth. The challenging thing about this discussion is there is a razor edge on this discussion, and we've been looking at the negative side, and at the same time, there's a lot of value that's coming out. And that's what makes this discussion so hard. It's what makes it uncomfortable for me. So like, as I said, my brother works in this industry. I've had opportunity to get early hands-on with VR tech. That stuff is a game changer. I mean, it will change how we as a country function. It will blow your mind when you have that experience. And what's so incredible about it is it doesn't matter. Right now, gaming's all about, a keyboard or a mouse. And if you don't know how to use those controllers, you're sort of left out. VR, you put on that thing and you're instantly in that word. Anybody, anytime, any age can deal with it. And in my experience with it, the opportunity to create a product that you buy a virtual ticket and you tour the Louvre. I could take someone that took a VR tour of the Louvre and someone that was really there, and if I didn't know the Louvre, I wouldn't know who was there and who wasn't. It's that good. And so what does that mean for tourism? I think about my family and family who's aging and can't move like they can, and they could sit in their living room and walk the wall of China. That's a reality that's coming. What if you could watch live TV of your favorite basketball game, but instead of watching it from a screen, you could put yourself underneath the net or anywhere you wanted on the floor as if that game was happening live. These are real realities, and there's really some wonderful positives to it. So to manage this space and to deal with the issues, the reality is we have to look at the whole, and how do we, again, bring it into our lives to show and bring up young people in a way that it's done responsibly. And that is different. That's where it's not a drug like heroin, oxy. It's something that's much more complicated, because we could spend 2 hours talking about all the wonderfulness that comes from this. Next month.
Can I just add to that? I totally agree with Gavin. Like, one example of it is VA. I'm not sure if you know this. VA is now utilizing virtual reality games when our veterans have burn their burn wounds. If you don't know this, it is incredibly painful to change your tend to your pain wounds, your burn wounds, and normally during this process, people are given high levels of morphine, right? Even during that time, people talk about they will feel a lot of pain. So VA now is doing, started a program a while back. The veteran would be in a VR game called Snow World. It's not even a first-person shooter type of game. It's like a really benign, really cute little game, and they report zero pain. Okay, so it is so immersive, and it's also, this is a perfect example of, it is basically a morphine drip that is more powerful than morphine, and it can be used for an amazing good, but if you don't set boundaries, if you don't role play and role model the behavior that this is how you use technology, or it's not any different than using an axe or a gun. If you don't show that, people will go crazy with it, and that's. Just look at that. All I want to leave. That's a perfect example of it. It can be perfectly beautiful and for good. But having a morphine drip attached to a 7-year-old, that's also pretty dangerous. Okay, so I don't think it is itself is evil. It's just we are learning as a society globally how to manage this. And I agree with John on that one. We're learning. There are things to be alarmed about, but we don't need to freak out. And we're learning, and things are evolving because Apple has realized, I think that was the first firm that realized it, from my perspective, that if they create a generation of mindless drones, they're not going to have the money to buy their products. Okay? So they were the first ones like, oh, let's add something to this. So there's hopeful stuff going on.
This is not a question. This is a huge thanks to the three of you. I hope that you are so busy over the next couple of years going to school boards, meeting with young people, because it is a crisis. I want to know what you said to your brother or sister, John, that has the 3 or 4 month old. What did you say to them about this whole issue? And I do believe, Oz, your comments about shame and the light. And I'm a little lucky because my kids are a little bit older than your, than your son. And I am hopeful. But I think it has to come out so that parents don't feel marginalized for making the decision to stop and say no. So thank you.
Please join me in thanking our panel. You guys were great.